Just a moment. All right. Today we welcome Michaela to our session. Now, I met Michaela several years ago when I first joined GRC, and she introduced me to the concept of biomimicry, which I had not heard about. So that must have been it was pre-pandemic. So it was 3-4 years ago. And since then, biomimicry concept itself and biomimicry related institutes have popped up all around the world. There are quite a few practitioners around the world now. So I reached out to Michaela and asked if she could speak about her journey, the journey of biomimicry itself, and what she's doing now. So over to you, Michaela. And folks, you can switch to the Michaela screen tab.
Okay, thanks so much, Tanuja. It is a real testament to synchronicity that we got together on Sunday on a short notice to talk about this topic. And because I've got great news to share with you, at the end, we've got a workshop where you can learn by doing, learn biomimicry by bringing your own challenge, which is coming up at the end of November. I'll talk to you about this in a little minute. So yeah, I'm very, very proud to be with you guys and to explain a little bit about what biomimicry is and what I call bio-infused principles. And since we're in the midst of COP29, Tanuja was kind of thinking, can we see what biomimicry can bring to us and what we can learn from nature applied to climate change? So I gathered a few examples. I'm no expert on these examples except on one, but I will walk you through different possibilities that you can then dig further about. So maybe just to start off, who am I? So my name is Michaela Emch, and I'm sitting right now in the Alps, in the middle of the Alps in Switzerland. Looking out, I can see the sunset on snowy mountains, and I will try to bring a little bit of nature's wisdom and the alpine mentors into your rooms. So you will see big images of the Alps, which should refresh you a little bit and also bring back the awe we should all have for nature. So I'm a member of the GRC since 4 years, I think. I created a framework called bio-infused communication and wrote a book about it, and that's how I got into the GRC. People kind of pulled me in as soon as I published. I also created a new company called Alpine Genius Think Tank that is place-based and nature positive, uses nature positive methodologies here in the Alps. And it teams up with other companies in other bioregions to bring biomimicry and positive outcomes for coaching, writing, copywriting, workshops, whatnot. I'm a facilitator. I'm a biomimicry practitioner since 2019. I discovered biomimicry through, funnily enough, just the beginning of the pandemic. I was looking, I'm a trained safari guide in Africa, and I did not know what to do when I was kind of locked in Europe. And so I was looking for a course I could do online at my safari guiding company. And they had an introduction to biomimicry. And within 5 minutes, I was hooked, and my whole life changed because of that. So thank you, COVID, I guess. And thank you again to surprises, rabbit holes you find on the internet, I guess. I've always been a communication specialist for more than 20 years now, a nature enthusiast. And so finally, everything came together with biomimicry. And I tried to slice a little piece of pie because there was not much in biomimicry in communication for humans. So I thought, I saw my ecological niche and thought, let's quickly write a book and occupy that niche before somebody else has the great idea to apply biomimicry to human communication. So that's a little bit about me. Enough, a little bit of Alps for your refreshment. That's actually very close to my house and one of my favorite places. So since we'll try to keep it short, I will just go over a few key concepts, which is biomimicry and bioinfused principles. If we have enough time, of course, conversation, please interject if you would like to, clarify anything if I'm going too quickly. I'm going to kind of race a little bit through. We can always come back if you'd like to go deeper. And I have maybe if we have time, I have a fun game at the end. So also the applications around climate change. So biomimicry, most of us practice it without knowing it. It's the practice of learning from and emulating nature to find solutions to human challenges. Basically, whenever we think of Leonardo da Vinci trying to create flying machines, he was practicing biomimicry. When we in the Alps gather food before winter and pile them up in our cupboards, we're doing the same thing as animals do, or squirrels. So it might be similar to biomimicry. What changes from nature inspiration to biomimicry is the intention of emulating the function that we're looking at. And that's where I know, Tanuja, you're all about verbs and not nouns. And biomimicry as well is all about verbs and not nouns. What we try to do is to mimic the functions and not only the behaviors. So we'll come back to that later. So it's a very ancient practice that is still practiced by First Peoples, for example, or very here in Europe, we don't have First Peoples anymore, but even our grandparents did some biomimicry, especially in agriculture and so on. So it's an ancient practice, and the word biomimicry has been coined by an American scientist called Janine Benyus. She lives on the West Coast, I think. She's still alive and gives conferences and has started a few biomimicry endeavors and programs that you can look up. She's a great person. Why do we turn to biomimicry to talk about our challenges? Basically, if you look at nature, you've got 3.8 billion years of research and development. So it would be strange not to learn from the champions that survived 5 mass extinctions and made it through the biggest hardships and changes that we've seen. Basically, the organisms we see around us today are like the super champions that really made it through. And most of them are here since at least the 5th mass extinction. So and continue to evolve and to integrate new niches and to adapt and to be resilient. Some change, some die. The niches are still there, they get filled. So there's lots of excitement in looking around us, and nature tried to solve every problem without having a conscience, which is pretty amazing. The conventional solutions do not meet our current challenges. Some do. I think there's a big competition between people who are based on nature-based solutions and people in technology. I think they can go hand in hand, but technology alone will not solve our problems. Technology is also very often the reason why we're in the problems we are in. Believing in only progress and technology will save us, I think it should be coupled to solutions that we can see in nature, and that technology can really benefit from it. Biomimicry is for everyone. You can apply it at every scale, from the nanotechnologies to space exploration, I guess, and in all fields. To prove that, I mean, I saw that nobody had ever done anything with human communication. Why not? You know, if your field is agriculture, you can do biomimetic agriculture, which would resemble permaculture, I guess, or agroforestry. You can apply it in every type of industry. I just saw today the French are putting out a webinar series about biomimicry applied to transportation. which was a lens I hadn't seen yet, but it probably is very exciting. Of course, only in French, I'm sorry. So if there's French speakers here, I would highly recommend having a look at this series. This is a bird that is, you have it too in North America. It's a ptarmigan. And ptarmigans are quite exciting because they change plumage in winter and summer to adapt to the changing conditions, which is quite exciting. And they also change altitude and migrate at a small scale in altitude, not wide, but up and down to find food. So I think that's something we also do here in Switzerland. Between winter and summer, people go up and down with their cows for grazing. So it's also biomimicry, I guess. So I was very excited to discover biomimicry. And then when I started writing my book about biomimicry, I kind of discussed things with biomimics. That's the word for people who apply biomimicry. And they were a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that we do not translate one-to-one. As in technical things, you can translate it one-to-one. You can look at the nose of a camel, how it desiccates the air in order to collect water. And then you translate that to desiccate algae for consumption or something. There you do a translation. But in human sciences, you cannot translate directly. And you cannot say we should all live like wolves, even though some people do say that. But that would not be biomimicry. So in order to like switch a little bit and not confuse biomimics with that, I decided to call it bio-infused communication. But it very highly inspires itself from biomimicry, but it also enables us to create metaphors around ecosystems that we can use for human practices, which would not be biomimicry. So just so you know why there's two terms here. So how do you do biomimicry? So the first thing you do is you look at the context. Context is always key. In biology, in functional biology, nothing exists if it doesn't fit its niche or niche, however you say it. There's two pronunciations. So you always have to look at the context, be it the context of the challenge you want to tackle or the context in which you find an organism that could inspire you. The way I do it is I find a functional challenge to nature. Let's say I'm a communication specialist. I'm like, how should humans communicate in order to get a better outcome? How can we solve conflicts? Solving conflict would be, for example, like the functional challenge. How does nature solve conflict? And then you go into biology. I'm very lucky to have a biologist friend that I can call night and day and say, hey, how does, nature do this or that? And he's got an incredible computational mind. There's also a website that you can test, which is called asknature.org. It will solve many problems for you. And then you will find species or organisms or processes in nature that answer some of those questions. And then you can abstract it and translate it again for human solutions. So when I was writing my book and I was looking at how should people communicate in order to get better outcomes and create more community, amazingly and without plan, I figured out 13 rules that would apply for human communication inspired by nature. And these 13 rules are the same as cellular communication in our bodies, which was not planned. And that was kind of amazing to me. It was like a aha moment. And basically, we should act like cells of a superorganism and organize in a way that is beneficial for society instead of being at our little cellular level. So you can look at any type of challenge and abstract it in order to come back and translate it back. So what is very important, and that's part of the ethos of biomimicry and related frameworks, is there is a wheel that I will share with Tanuja. Maybe you can like do a bundle with links at the end, I guess. There's a wheel that's called the Nature's Life's Principles. And you can take this wheel, it's got, I think, 23 or 26 little functions, major functions in nature, and you can tick it off with every project. And usually if you tick them off, you should not be harmful for nature or for people. So it's like a safety risk assessment wheel, so that you're not damaging nature or the communities. And to me, of course, what is very exciting is communication is at every stage. You can communicate about the challenges, you can communicate about the species, you can communicate about the solution, you can communicate about what does it teach us in a wider range, what is it, what is going on at the ecosystemic level, what is going on at the process level. So it's a fantastic tool to get people around an idea and to explain complex things, complex problems in a way that they have seen before. I was working with Selar, who's also at the GRC, Selar Henderson, to develop a framework to discuss how interactions should happen in Papua New Guinea while they're electrifying a village. And the idea was to talk about the ecosystem they live in and to take that as a metaphor in order to for them to understand, these people are mostly illiterate, to understand the concept of coexistence and cooperation that they see in the forest around them already. So I think it's pretty cool to be able to help people rediscover their surroundings and learn from them. So maybe here I will quickly race through the 10 natural rules for bio-infused practices, but basically replicating strategies that work, why reinvent the wheel every time, see what nature is doing, adapt to changing conditions. Those are part of these 23 rules that are in the life's principles. So maybe we can go back to some of them later. I don't want to be too long. Hello, Marmot. They're already gone into hibernation. And so just a few examples for climate change. I divided it into 2 slides. One is the technical solutions, like, scientific engineering. And the other one, I took the social aspects. So let's have a first look. Of course, biomimicry is very keen on solving climate change related problems. And here you can have, I took 4 examples here. At the top right, you have, you can improve energy efficiency. Here we're looking at the fin of a humpback whale that has little bumps on it, right? It's not smooth. And on the right side, you see that's the blade of a windmill, which is more efficient when it's got the same bumps as the humpback whale, and it makes less noise, and it doesn't kill as many birds because the noise is reduced and doesn't pitch that high. So that's a very cool application of biomimicry in creating better energy efficiency. Something that many people are looking at is carbon sequestration. So biomimicry would do that at the systemic level, saying how do coral reefs function to capture carbon, meaning how can we combine different aspects of carbon sequestration in order to make sure that it's long-term. And also the prairie ecosystems, you can think of any type of ecosystem, the way it pulls carbon out and distributes it in its ecosystem at different layers is probably more efficient than having machines sucking CO2 out of the air, which is, I saw that machine in Iceland. It's ridiculous. It's kind of cool that it works, but I'd rather have a nice prairie than that in my backyard, to say the least. Of course, most of you are familiar with permaculture, agroforestry, and so on, heavily inspired by biomimicry. Sustainable agriculture, of course, can help reduce emissions and pollution. Here, the example is, of course, the ladybugs that you can use in your garden instead of pesticides if you've got an invasion of these little, what are they called, these little guys? The things that are on the roses.
Are they aphids?
They're
Well,
aphid, exactly, aphids. So if you have aphid invasions, you can, order your ladybugs instead of spraying it with DEET. And I just heard that you can do the same with mites. If your sweaters are full of holes because of mites, you can order little parasitic wasps that come through the mail and will parasite the mite and kill it. And then you only have to brush off the little cadavers of the wasps, and your mite problem is solved, which is kind of funny. I heard that 2 days ago, and I had to show it to my daughter because we have mites in my house. We might order our wasps. And other solutions that can be technical and mixed, blended with natural solutions is coastal management by reviving mangroves. You have way better erosion control, especially in Florida and so on and so forth. So mangroves are making a big comeback as a good protection for coasts. If you have it conjunct with a coral reef in front, you've got the best protection you can have. No need to build dams and to save poor concrete. You can do it with natural ways. So these are some of the technical solutions that I could relate to climate change. And now my favorites, they're social innovation, biomimicry applications. Of course, circular economy. In nature, there is no waste. It all gets recycled, upcycled, reduced to smaller pieces. So whatever the circular economy can look out for anywhere in nature, everything is circular, and the loops are closed. Resilient infrastructure. You can see here, I've got it's a weird image where you have a leaf on one side, and on the other side you can see the map of a city. It's kind of cool. There's lots of research in urban planning derived from biomimicry to manage fluxes of people, of water, of transportation. And I think there's a very cool applications there. There's another one that I didn't depict here, which is the slime mold. I don't know if you've ever seen slime molds. They're unicellular, yellowish, looks kind of like a net, and it can plan out a city if you put down food at the main connection hubs. It will map out the city of Tokyo with all the undergrounds you need within 2 hours. So it's pretty smart, and it really resembles the one that the engineers came up over 60 years. So it's kind of amazing. You can watch that video. That's pretty amazing. Healthy ecosystems, natural and human. Here I put a little picture of a beaver because the beaver is known as an ecosystem architect. By building a dam, it creates a whole new ecosystem. And maybe we should be the beavers of our communities by creating something or moving something in our ecological niche. We can maybe improve the place for everyone, be it in our gardens. I mean, if you have gardens, backyards, just let it be and change your view and reduce pesticides and leave the leaves and stuff. And that very often helps nature a big deal. And if other like-minded people do it every few houses, nature can kind of leap from one to the next, and you get corridors for species that can go back to water where they couldn't or whatever. And of course, to me, you can see my book here, From Nature's Mouth, which is the book for bio-infused human communication. That's what I was telling you before. Nature-inspired narratives and education bring back awe into people's life, bring back nature as something you think about instead of just use, and learn from it instead of only about it. Another little bit of Alps for you. And so maybe we want to open the discussion now. I don't know, Tanuja, because I've got a little quiz if people want. But they can also do it without me. And here I have 3 leading questions. Where would you apply biomimicry in your field? And what aspects of climate change are your priorities? And how do we get started? So the floor is
Michaela,
open.
this has been great fun. It has been great fun. And I especially appreciated how you inserted the Alps every few slides. So it was like how you cleanse the palate before the next course. That was beautiful.
It's my visual gherkin.
The quiz, it would be great fun to do it together, but we have 25 minutes left. How long do you think the quiz might take?
I don't know, but let me just go here. You can scan the QR code and you can do it by yourselves.
Okay.
Here I did just maybe a little explanation. Who is your leadership mentor in the Swiss Alps? I have 4 mentor leadership types, which you can see on the next slide. And I would be curious to know which one you are. So we've got the butterfly, we've got the chamois. What is the one with the small horns? I don't know the name in English. And then we've got this nivalis here, this little bird, and the one with the big horns. I never remember the name. The ibex, that's the ibex. And then the other one is more of a group thing, less solitary. So okay. Yeah, I leave this here so you can scan the QR code, and please reach out to me and I'll tell you all about your mentor organism or which one you would like to be instead of the one you got. Let's see.
Okay, so I've scanned it on my own, and I'll put the link in the chat, everybody.
Perfect.
And folks, it's okay, Michaela, to leave the slides here, but folks, you could switch to the meeting tab, then we can look at each other. Yeah, lovely. So that was very excellent, and we learned a lot, or at least I did, and I see how the discussion has moved forward quite a bit and entered different fields in the last 4 years, which is not such a long time. I especially like the one about the little things sticking out of the windmill fins. So simple solution like that, and it is also from an engineering perspective a non-obvious solution, but with very large results.
So and Jill, I'll just go back for Jill. Sorry, I popped it out. Let's quickly go to the rules so you can have a look at the rules while we speak. Here, there's the 1 to 5. Tell me when you're ready, and I'll go to 6 to 10. Sorry about that, Tanuja.
No problem, Gil. So she has put the rules in the other tab, and she can switch to page 2.
Go to 6 to 10, Michaela.
6 to 10. Here we go.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So yeah, you were talking about non-obvious solutions.
Yeah. I was saying how the little edges on the fins don't seem to lead to something efficient. That is our idea of efficiency, is to make things as smooth as possible. And what we forget is that smoothness is efficient in particular contexts and not in others. So our decontextualization is central to our education system. We even think of knowledge as something you take from our observation of phenomena, of data. We generalize from data. And then having generalized, which by the way is another word for decontextualization, having decontextualized in this way, we think we have sort of achieved the active ingredient of knowledge, not realizing that knowledge by itself is not knowledge until it is applied to a context. And that's what's so interesting about this.
I think it's really quite fascinating when you kind of start talking biomimicry with people. Sometimes I don't use the word, but you're like, nature inspired or whatever, because sometimes people are like, oh, biomimicry, another thing I have to learn, So you're like, no, let's just have a look at how nature would do it. And people come to the conclusion themselves. I kind of guide them to that, but that context is everything. And context is always everything. I mean, we can tell any type of joke depending if the context is the right one. And if you've put the caveats before and after saying, you need to contextualize or you need to acknowledge the context or both. And people forget that. People forget that context is key. And in everything complexity, context is always key.
We've had Donella Meadows talk about that, Margaret Wheatley talk about that as well, that our eyes look at the action, but not a field within which the action is taking place.
Yeah.
So folks, there you go. Rick, he's raised his hand. Go for it, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love the anthropomorphizing nature to bring out biomimicry metaphors, but I'd be curious to know if you've been asked this question before, because you mentioned one thing that caught my ear, which was nature doesn't have consciousness. Now, some people will dispute that. There are people out there that say it does have consciousness. That's not material to the question. And that is, how can you use biomimicry metaphors to actually address the challenge that we don't anthropomorphize nature enough, and that the greatest impediment to that is our lack of consciousness.
Please define consciousness, because I heard types of consciousness. I heard that consciousness.
I won't go into a great deal. I'm just saying consciousness is a human attribute that we're self-aware of our self-awareness.
Yes. Okay.
So if that's very simple, you could write a book on that.
Yes.
But so in other words, humans have the capacity of being able to do metacognition, etc. I mean, we have remarkable resources, but the impediment to making that transformation of adopting biomimicry metaphors is our lack of, say, evolutionary development of our consciousness to be able to anthropomorphize nature to its fullest extent.
It's funny that you say that, because basically nature as a system is a living, learning system, right?
Of course it is, yeah.
It's learning to be more efficient and to continue to survive. Basically, life is conducive to life and does not aim at doing it in a certain way. It just does it the most efficient way possible, depending on the context, right? So that's what I meant when I said it doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't have a goal. The goal is to self-perpetuate and to optimize the use of resources. We humans have all kinds of ethics and morals and ideas and conflicting ideas about how we're supposed to organize in order to maximize resources or resource use whatsoever. And that's very interesting, because as I was done with the first book, I was like, oh, I want to write a book about governance inspired by nature. And it's still on the back burner for this very simple reason, is that nature has no ethics.
Exactly.
And I cannot write it. I have lots of metaphors and examples, but I need to define governance in such a way that I cannot write that book. So I've been discussing with an ethician,
Ethicist, yeah.
ethicist,
Mhm.
an ethicist, and how to solve that. We didn't solve it, but we wrote a series of 5 articles about innovation inspired by nature, which was lots of fun. But we cannot solve that because the nature of nature does not allow for us to learn from it on that level.
I agree with you. Very quickly, I just add, and I'll let somebody else speak. I would say that we need to focus on the ethics of equity and meta-governance, but that's for a completely different discussion.
Absolutely. So yeah, we cannot, biomimicry cannot help here. It can help in explaining equilibrium and perpetual inequilibrium that tends to equilibrium, and to the interplay and synergies and collaboration instead of competition and such things, but you cannot devise a society from it, I think. Maybe, but
Michaela, I think that is the very core of the conundrum. It is that learning from nature, we are nature, we are a part of nature, we are, and when you get to the very core of it, there are no ethics. And I
Right.
think that in itself is what makes it all so difficult for us to create. Catherine is disagreeing. And I think that is where the differentiation begins, and where we, Catherine is absolutely disagreeing with my point. And there are many things in nature that you can't really disagree on, because they are the laws of nature. But once you get into the realm where you can have differing opinions, then what is it about that? I mean, I look forward to hearing your evolution on this subject, and as you move forward into it, because I really think it's the heart of the situation, and worthy of a great deal of conversation.
I would love to have like a symposium about this.
Yes, me
No?
too, because
What about it?
absolutely, especially like my other area before I moved full time into regeneration as a job, I was in end of life care,
Yeah.
and that is an incredible place for where this issue is just front and center all of the time. So yeah, that strikes at the heart of it.
Yeah, and it depends on your definition of ethics, right? But if you look at
Absolutely. Well,
nature as functions, if you stay in functions, you can maybe do something. But as soon as you try to make it a little bit wider, you get into ethical problems, let's say.
yeah, ethical problems.
Yeah.
Catherine, you're gonna share your thoughts, please.
Well, I did put my thoughts in the chat. I think the problem is that we want to see ethics in terms of our own needs and desires, and not in terms of something that transcends that. And we get so caught up in seeing, I mean, historically, ethics is all about how people work with people, frankly, and trying to make it okay that we can work with each other. And that's become incredibly difficult and complex, because we are very complex. And so we have an ethics for medicine and an ethics for science and an ethics for parent raising, and that's garbage. Nature is a unified whole, and we do not understand how to work with unified wholes, and resist it. I think actually that it means, and I think maybe this is one of the pivots is this little egoic thing, that it means that somehow or other we have to give up something of ourselves for the whole, and that where that rubber hits the road is really dicey for people. People have a real difficulty understanding how to do that with integrity. And so we capitulate, we do all sorts of things, but we don't understand how to stand up into that space so that the fullness of ourselves shows up in that space, and everybody else in their fullness can respond to that. It's the fullness that makes the difference. That's the beauty of cells, because they're so concerned with their own survival, but they're so open to the survival of others as well. And that finessing that happens between cells is what we don't have skill in. We want it either or. We want it our way, or it has to be their way. We get this either or thing instead of this fusing and this willingness to subtly adjust to make it okay, which means that we're both giving and taking ourselves at the same time. There are certain things, yes, that we won't be able to express, and trusting when the outside of ourselves says, oh, this doesn't work for me, that's true, instead of discarding it or dismissing it or those kinds of things. So when we talk ethics, for me, it has to do with the goal of nature, which some people believe doesn't exist. And that is, nature is really intent on life, period.
That's it.
Really, really intent on life. And when you hold that as a piece of your decision making, then you can begin to say, my goodness, I really want to do this. But if it doesn't bring life to somebody else, that's a problem. And I'm willing to deal with that. I'm willing to take that back and figure out how I can express that little piece of myself in a way that doesn't take life from somebody else. What a concept. And it's that interchange of everybody doing that with the goal always of being life. That's the test. Does it work? If it doesn't, oh, well, crap, then we tank it and we do something else. So that's my kind of long-winded version of that. But life is so key, and it's absolutely not something that humans think about.
It's
you.
funny that you say that, because I think people think that life is just a state of being, but it's also self-perpetuating, and it's also a verb to life, kind of, to live. You have intention.
Well,
Because
to
you can
create
stop
the
living,
conditions
right?
that support
Yeah,
life is genius.
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's just absolute key. Everything does it but us. We totally ignore that piece.
Mhm.
And so our ethics never work. They always fall short.
So Rick talked about consciousness before. Do we ignore all that piece because we're conscious?
No, because I think everything is conscious.
Because we're conscious in the way that humans are conscious. What
We're
is
just young.
it about us that we don't do what every other living being does?
We're young. We don't get it yet. We don't have the breadth of understanding to include the complexity. We keep trying to make things simple. And when you're simplifying things, now there's an elegance that's different. But when we try and make things really simple from a human perspective, that means eliminating things, which we're really good at. And that always creates a problem. It comes back to bite us because you can't ignore the rest of life, at least not for long, which we're certainly finding. We're discovering that too.
I'm just reminding everyone that more than 50% of the Earth does not live like that, of humans on Earth.
True.
Right? I would probably say 60, 70% doesn't.
60 or 70% of the human population take others into consideration in their
Yes.
decision making?
as part of their culture.
Yep.
That doesn't mean
Because
greed
it's a
doesn't
Western
exist.
civilization phenomenon that we're only concerned about ourselves.
Well, Western also is incorrect because remember, West includes the Native Americans and the indigenous of South America, the
So what's the
Alaskan.
proper term? Is there a proper label for the part that is individuated? Is it the Enlightenment folks or what?
In some circles, I have heard the term European used because we remember that the population of North America came from Europe. The population that we think of,
Concepts.
yes, colonization, but European colonization, huh?
Yeah,
Not
Right.
other colonizations.
Yeah.
So, but I would rather just not use the terms. I just say modern education, modern medicine, the ones we all live with now.
Yeah, but
Well,
there
it's
was
all about power
was-
over for me.
Yeah.
That's the
Yes.
really key piece.
That's the
that-
key piece of that phenomenon that
Yes.
Yeah, nature's about power with, and we're about power over. And when the minute you go with, then you have to take into account that other.
Mhm.
But when you go power over, you don't. It simplifies things. You can just
Yes.
ignore it, and that's the habit that we're so comfortable with.
You're talking
But
about
there's a point
power over
before
that's a lot
which-
more than 30 or 40% of the planet.
Yep.
But in fairness, there was a point at which, not to discredit anything anyone's saying, but, and this isn't my claim, but actually my ministers, before we made the mass, we went to the New World and colonized and conquered and created our independent country here. There was a point at which the Druids, or my ancestors, what's the other name for them? The Celts, those indigenous people, respected nature. And then, shortly after they're moving to conquer this nation, that changed. They relinquished that in some way. So, all of us at one point were came from indigenous peoples. So it is what it is. It happened. So the point is, let's use these tools. I'm intrigued. How do we use them? What's the best way? It sounds like I've been excited about this for a long time, but what's the best way to put on the gloves that will accelerate us to solutions? I don't expect an easy answer, but I'm just wondering if something like AI can help get us excited about some tangible, subset of solutions we can actually start playing with. Or is that just like a pipe dream? Do we just have to go to ask nature, just really spend some time with it?
Well, I prefer nature over artificial intelligence for sure, personally. But yeah, it's great questions.
Yeah. And I wondered if I could
go ahead.
I wondered if I could ask your question, Eckhart, to Michaela by asking her, in your experience, when you work with clients or different situations, what are the concepts or implementations that you find people have the most difficulty with?
Collaborating, which is great because I just have a new workshop which is about leadership and teamwork and collaboration instead of competition. And
But that's a male thing too, isn't it? The male paternalistic.
Yes.
I think the consensus is that has been a failure, and we need to make that shift. And once we do,
collaboration part for people.
not necessarily all, but by and large, that could make a big impact, and it is beginning to.
Yes, thank you, Eckhart. And 3 people have been waiting patiently. I want to allow for brief comments, please, guys. We're great hour here. Nikki.
Hey, so I just think it would be really fun for us to explore more about things like governance and economics if we look at other species and how they manage those. I'm a fan of bonobos. um, just to put my little Heyoka voice in here. But also it's interesting, I just wanted to back up what Tanuja said. I was listening to this 3-hour long video last night. And part of the conversation was how, not to homogenize, but for the most part, people that come from the Asian continent think in collectivist ways in a way that makes them really confused about the practices of the West and their perceptions of that, and not really understanding it at all, like, and trying to find their way in it, but not understanding why we in the West make the choices we make that are so harmful to us and stratify us in such intense ways. So I just wanted to back up to Nuja on that, because I literally just listened to that last night. But last thing I'll say, and it kind of circles back around to the bonobos, I think it's really important, if we're going to use biomimicry principles without, without even talking about ethics, that we really should look to our closest cousins that have a very peaceful society and have very very established societies that were perfectly fine until we came along. And so maybe something to really look at, because if I stop tiptoeing around, what I'm really trying to say is nature prioritizes the feminine, and we in the West don't seem to live in that kind of context of biomimicry. So just throwing that out.
Thank you. Thank you. And Colleen, I'm going to let you jump the queue because we haven't heard from you yet this morning.
Well, I think that the reason why we have problems with people serving their own personal interest rather than the interest of the group is because of immaturity. And that is a matter of, I've put the trajectory. An upward trajectory requires a period of independence. You don't mature without that. And so, but then you have to move on from that to become to work interdependently. So I think that it's just a matter of immaturity, and you can have whole cultures that are immature.
Mm-hmm.
You know that in the succession of an ecosystem, right? First you have like the pioneer species and so on and so forth, and they're competing wildly. And I mean, they're like poisoning the soil. They're like, really at war, up to a point where there's a tipping point where the ecosystem will fight for the ecosystem and not for the individual plants. And that's the tipping point we're trying to achieve with humans.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
so when you're saying immature, there's also something about it, which is arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And we think we know, or we've seen this before. We've been around how long? About, 3.8 billion years. Maybe we should learn something.
Yeah. And Colleen, speaking of maturity, immaturity, what really gets me is that in the big business sector, there is no way to be a mature person. There's no room for a mature
I think that there
business behavior.
Yeah, there can be. It's called benefit corporations.
Okay.
Well, and Ray Anderson is a perfect example of a mature business person. Ray Anderson from Interface Carpets was a mature business person, but we don't have many of those. That is really true.
And he was a good friend of Janine Benyus's as well.
Yes.
It's not.
Janine really helped him with his
not
movement.
Encouraged. It really is not encouraged. But I do think there is, yes, that taking biomimicry and looking at the cycles, right? And that's what we're really, thank you, Michaela, for pointing out how in the beginning, the plants are fighting each other, and then they. I would love to understand that tipping point better. So, in order to be able to model that for humanity, is that okay? What actually happens? Because the way it's understood, just sort of commercially, is that the strongest wins. And
Right,
but
that's
that's
not
not
true.
really what happened, but it's been simplified to them. So that it's really misunderstood as in that patriarchal way. Thank you, Eckhart, for bringing that to the fore. Is yes. Wow, what a great conversation this morning. I want to invite you back soon so that we can continue, because this, I believe, is really, really what we need to be talking about. Thanks, Lynn. Take care. See you. And see everyone back again.
Yeah. And such a wonderful conversation now that COP has started this week, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very relevant, not just relevant, but very on point.
Yeah.
So thank you, Michaela, our warmest thanks.
Yes.
And let's discuss how we can have you back. I'm going to switch
I'd
off the
love
recording
to do
now.
that. I would love to come back and, talk about either communication or collaboration.
Governance.
Well, governance. I mean, governance is when the whole conversation blew up. I mean, I think that's absolutely at the heart of it. And Catherine, I don't think you and I really disagree